In this episode of the Law Firm Marketing Podcast, we talk about the importance of social media and in particular LinkedIn with social media expert Mark Parker. And in our quick tip, we ask probably the most important question your firm can ask in relation to its web presence. Has your firm got a content strategy? Welcome to the Law Firm Marketing Podcast, proudly brought to you by Grow Your Firm, the professional services marketing company. If your firm is struggling to get on the front foot with its online marketing strategy, Grow Your Firm can help. We are working with firms both in Australia and in the United States in co-creating digital solutions for professional services firms. If you need our help, then contact us at www.growyourfirm.com.au. That is www.growyourfirm.com.au. Well, we've got another great episode for you. But before we get there, thank you to last fortnight's guest, Andrei Valchek, who put a cat amongst the pigeons with his passionate attempt to turn lawyers into salespeople. We got a few responses which I intend to ask Andrei to talk to in an upcoming episode. I also have to thank you, the growing number of listeners who collectively have positioned this podcast in iTunes as new and noteworthy, at least in Australia. So remember, if you're getting some worth out of this, be sure to let me know by leaving your comments at iTunes. If you're like most professional services firms, chances are when it comes to your website, it's become what it is through no real strategy. In other words, it's just evolved without any real forethought. Now, if we can offer any advice from our experience in working with professional services firms, both in Australia and overseas, it is most definitely to start with a content strategy. In other words, work out what the content's going to be and who in your firm is going to generate that content. Your firm has to concede that in the current landscape, content is fundamentally important and now is intrinsically linked to where you or your firm will rank in Google. In other words, as we've said repeatedly in this podcast series and on our blog posts, your firm can win online, but it must emanate from a paradigm shift within your firm that sees the proliferation or the generation of excellent, useful, well thought out content. It just has to become part of your firm's DNA. In fact, so passionate about this that we simply don't like working with firms that aren't generating good content or don't have a commitment at least to generating good content. And why? It's because it's just way too difficult to give firms a good return on investment without that commitment. Now that said, if your firm wants to go it alone, which we obviously don't endorse, then a good place to start is to read Christina Halvorson's article, The Discipline of Content Strategy. Now we'll leave a link in our show notes to that article, but it's most definitely essential reading if you want to do this yourself. Mark Parker has become one of Australia's leading thought leaders when it comes to social media. He is the founder of Smart Selling International, and over the past 5 years, this business has developed specific expertise in understanding and harnessing social media for B2B companies. Now, what this has translated to is that Mark spends a lot of his time in helping companies solve complex business problems by using social technologies in simpler, sustainable and smarter ways. His work ranges from helping define social media marketing strategy, sales strategy and social business design and implementation. Mark, thanks for joining us on the Law Firm Marketing Podcast.
You're welcome, Dan.
Mark, for a while now you've been speaking across Australia in relation to social media and what it means for business and law firms. What are you telling people?
When I sit down to talk to business leaders, senior executives, one of the key things I try and stress is why they should care about the growth of social media and what's actually happening in terms of changing behaviours, changing communication models. At the end of the day, there's a lot of hype around the space, and I try and break that down into key points that they can digest around the fact that behaviours are changing, whether it's business to consumer behaviours or even in the business space now in our markets and even in this region, we're seeing really quantifiable evidence that buyer behaviours are changing. People are wanting different types of engagement, and business leaders need to be understanding this so they can in fact empower their organisations to change and to embrace new models rather than being the leader who blocks new ways of engaging in business.
And when we talk social media, it's just not a homogenous term, is it? I mean, it means lots of different things. How would you classify or define social media?
Interesting question. I think one thing I found from building a business where we focus solely on social media as our growth strategy was that in social media, we're basically using the web to have a conversation, to create an environment where there's engagement. One thing we realised very early on, and this is something I live by, is that social media is all about talking with your customers rather than talking to them. And particularly those of us in business development or sales and marketing, this is a really key lesson. We've got to actually think about how do we talk with our customers rather than talking to them. And that's really where social media kind of gets a little bit lost in the hype. I think we've actually got to break it down and say it's about how do we use the web to enable a conversation.
So it's really about engagement, which I suppose for lots of law firms, in fact, lots of businesses, that's a significant paradigm shift, isn't it? Because, you know, it was once the case that a law firm simply put a shingle out the front door and wait for clients to come knocking. Whereas the shift now really is about, well, becoming user or client-centric, focusing on what services you can provide, as well as going over and above and providing people with often free, useful content and what have you. Is this shift, this paradigm shift, a struggle for many of the firms and businesses that you work with?
I think that's correct, Dan. I think in many ways how we have to think of the world now is that there has been a democratisation of knowledge. We've actually got to think about how we contribute our knowledge so that a person who may want to engage with us can inform themselves, can educate themselves and get to the point where they do want to engage with the firm. Another way to think of it is, particularly I think in the law industry, and this is not unique to Australia, I think this is a global challenge, is within law we've actually got to think about how do we humanise what they do. I think there is an element of fear and trepidation from people wanting to talk to a lawyer. Part of the opportunity with social media is to, in fact, humanise what they, how the process works, help them understand when and why they should be talking with a firm, but also help them understand that it's not big and scary, that you can, in fact, utilise a law firm as a key strategic input into your business to help you avoid problems down the track. Dan, as you probably know, a lot of law firms are taking this approach that